Rain fell hard that evening, painting the streets in streaks of silver and gray. The city moved fast, too fast for anyone to notice a man struggling under the weight of 2 torn grocery bags. His coat was soaked, his hands trembled, and his eyes darted around for help that never came. People walked past him, umbrellas tilted just enough to keep compassion out. But one man stopped. Ryan stood still for a moment, watching the old man from across the street. He had a train to catch, a boss who didn't tolerate lateness, and a life already weighed down by disappointment. Yet, something in his chest whispered that this moment mattered. Against logic, against reason, he stepped into the rain. The old man looked up in surprise as Ryan grabbed a heavier bag. Their eyes met, one filled with exhaustion, the other with silent gratitude. Neither spoke much during the short walk to the man's small apartment building. Ryan refused tea politely, shaking the water from his sleeves. The old man smiled softly, his voice warm but fragile. "Even a drop of kindness," he said, "creates ripples you cannot see." Ryan nodded, though he didn't really understand. He left, unaware that this ordinary encounter would become the thread pulling his life toward an extraordinary turn. Days later, the rain returned, and with it came loss. Ryan sat at his desk as his manager handed him a letter, termination, effective immediately. The company was downsizing. He walked home in silence, his shoes scraping against wet pavement, the city lights reflecting his uncertainty. Rent was due, bills piled up. Hope seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. He applied for jobs everywhere, but found only rejection. Nights stretched long, filled with the hum of streetcars and the faint sound of laughter from apartments he could no longer relate to. One morning, Ryan woke to find an eviction notice taped to his door. The ink had run from the rain that had soaked through the envelope, blurring the words that sealed his fate. He sat on the floor, staring at it, feeling small. He thought about the old man, about that strange phrase, ripples you cannot see. He wondered if kindness mattered when life felt like a punishment for good intentions. Desperation pushed him toward a small job listing at a local firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a chance. He walked in wearing his only decent suit, the one he'd ironed 3 times just to hide the wear. The receptionist smiled and asked him to wait. Minutes felt like hours. Then the office door opened, and an elderly voice called his name. Ryan turned. Standing there, dressed neatly and with a calm grace, was the same old man from the rainy street. The recognition struck them both at once. The old man smiled as if he'd been expecting him. "I see the ripples finally reached you," he said quietly. Ryan's throat tightened. The old man gestured for him to sit, eyes kind but wise. "You helped me when you didn't have to. I was not a stranger that day. I was a lesson waiting for the right heart." Ryan didn't know what to say. The old man continued, "Life doesn't forget kindness. It just waits for the right moment to return it." The interview was brief, more conversation than formality. By the end, Ryan had a new job, not just employment, but a beginning. When he stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke apart, letting sunlight spill across the wet pavement. He stood still, feeling the warmth on his face, realizing that the old man's words were never just about groceries or gratitude. They were about the unseen symmetry of life, the way good returns when least expected. That night, Ryan wrote a note and pinned it to his wall. It read, "Kindness is never lost, only waiting." He didn't know it then, but those words would soon guide him into a new chapter, one that would test everything he thought he knew about giving, loss, and the strange power that connects us all. Weeks passed, and Ryan settled into his new job. The company was small but warm, the kind of place where people smiled in the morning and remembered each other's names. The old man, whose name was Mr. Hale, ran it with quiet grace. He never raised his voice, never rushed his employees, and treated everyone as though they mattered. Ryan admired that, though he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something mysterious about his new boss. Mr. Hale never spoke much about his past, and when he did, there was always a distant tone in his voice, as if he were remembering a life that wasn't entirely his anymore. One late afternoon, as the sky burned orange over the city, Mr. Hale called Ryan into his office. Papers were neatly stacked on the desk, but in the center sat an old wooden box. "Sit, Ryan," he said softly. "I have a question for you." Ryan obeyed, uncertain but curious. Mr. Hale looked him in the eye. "Tell me," he asked, "do you still believe kindness is worth anything in this world?" The question hit deeper than Ryan expected. He thought for a long moment before answering. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "I want to believe it is. But kindness doesn't pay rent, and sometimes it just leaves you empty." Mr. Hale nodded, a faint smile forming. "That's the problem with kindness, Ryan. People think it's a transaction. It's not meant to be counted. It's meant to be remembered." Mr. Hale opened the box and pulled out a folded letter, yellowed with time. He handed it to Ryan. "Read it," he said. The handwriting was shaky, written decades ago. It told the story of a young soldier who saved a stranger's life during a storm in the mountains, a stranger who later became his savior when fate turned against him. At the bottom of the page was a single line: "The world remembers in circles, not straight lines." Ryan looked up, confused but intrigued. "Whose story is this?" he asked. Mr. Hale's eyes softened. "Mine," he said quietly. "And someday maybe yours." That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. The letter haunted him. He thought about his own struggles, about how his single act of kindness had returned as an opportunity when he needed it most. He began noticing small things: the way people looked tired on the subway, the silent battles behind everyday faces. One morning, he saw a woman drop her wallet in the street. Without thinking, he ran after her and returned it. She smiled gratefully, saying she had just been laid off and that losing her ID would have made everything worse. Ryan walked away, feeling a strange warmth in his chest, the kind he hadn't felt since the day he met Mr. Hale. A week later, he noticed something unusual at work. A new employee joined, the same woman from the street. She had been hired as part of a new department expansion. When she saw Ryan, her face lit up in recognition. "You again," she said with a laugh. Mr. Hale, watching from his office window, smiled knowingly. He saw what Ryan couldn't, that the ripple had already begun to grow wider. As days passed, Ryan and the woman, whose name was Claire, grew closer. They shared lunch breaks, stories, and small moments that made the office feel less like work and more like family. Mr. Hale often observed them from afar, his expression thoughtful. One evening, he called Ryan again. "Do you believe now?" he asked. Ryan hesitated. "I think I'm starting to," he said. Mr. Hale nodded. "Good, because soon you'll have to prove it." Those words lingered in Ryan's mind long after he left the office. Something in the way Mr. Hale had said them didn't sound like a prediction. It sounded like a warning. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance and the wind howled outside his apartment, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that another test was coming, one that would force him to decide what kindness truly meant, when it demanded not comfort but sacrifice. A memory that refused to fade. The days grew colder, the nights longer, and Ryan began to sense an invisible shift around him. Mr. Hale seemed quieter than usual, his once steady hands trembling slightly when he reached for a pen or poured his tea. Claire noticed it too, often glancing at him with concern during meetings. One morning, Ryan found Mr. Hale sitting alone in the break room, staring at an old photograph, a younger version of himself with a smiling woman and a small child. Ryan hesitated at the door, unsure whether to interrupt. "Come in, Ryan," Mr. Hale said softly without looking up. "You remind me of my son." The word struck Ryan like a cold wave. He sat down slowly, waiting for Mr. Hale to continue. "He passed away many years ago," Mr. Hale said. "He was kind, just like you. Too kind, perhaps. This world took him before it could understand him." Ryan didn't know how to respond. He wanted to say something comforting, but nothing seemed enough. Mr. Hale folded the photograph and placed it back in his wallet. "I've learned," he said quietly, "that kindness isn't just about helping others. It's about surviving yourself. Because if you lose that part of you, the world wins." Then he stood and walked out, leaving Ryan with an ache that words couldn't touch. Later that week, trouble came to the company. A major client withdrew their contract, blaming a financial error. The office filled with tension as numbers failed to add up. Rumors spread fast. Layoffs were coming again. Ryan worked late nights trying to fix the reports, but something didn't add up. It wasn't just a mistake. It looked deliberate. Someone had altered data. Claire helped him dig deeper, and together they uncovered an email trail pointing to one of the senior accountants. The discovery left Ryan torn. If he exposed the truth, someone would lose their job. But if he stayed silent, the company might collapse, and everyone could suffer. He couldn't sleep that night. The city lights flickered through his window as he replayed Mr. Hale's words in his mind. Surviving yourself. What did that mean? By morning, he had made a decision. He printed the evidence and went straight to Mr. Hale's office. Mr. Hale listened silently, his face unreadable. When Ryan finished, there was a long pause. "You did the right thing," Mr. Hale finally said. "But right things have consequences." That afternoon, the accountant was dismissed. The office fell into uneasy silence, and Ryan felt no satisfaction, only the weight of what doing good sometimes costs. Days later, as he stayed late finishing reports, Ryan found a note slipped under his door. It had no signature, only a sentence written in the same shaky handwriting he remembered from the old letter. The ripples never stop, even when the water calms. His hands trembled as he read it. He looked around, but the hallway was empty. When he asked Mr. Hale about it the next day, the old man simply smiled. "Some lessons revisit us when we're ready," he said. But things were about to take a darker turn. That evening, as Ryan walked home, he heard footsteps following him. He turned, but the street was empty. The next morning, he found his apartment door slightly ajar, though nothing was missing. A single object sat on his table, an old coin with strange markings, one he had never seen before. He picked it up, feeling a chill crawl up his spine. Etched along the edge were words that made his heart race. He gave kindness. Now kindness will test him. Ryan stood frozen, the city noise fading into silence. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't just coincidence. The ripples were moving again, and this time, they were pulling him into something far beyond a simple act of kindness. Something that would blur the line between fate, morality, and the unseen balance that governed every human choice. The coin sat on Ryan's desk like an unanswered question. He turned it over again and again, running his fingers along the strange symbols carved into its surface. There was something haunting about it, something that felt both ancient and familiar. That night, he couldn't shake the unease. He placed the coin inside a drawer and tried to sleep, but the sound of distant thunder kept him awake. At 3 a.m, he heard it, a soft knock on the door, 3 slow taps. He froze. When he opened it, the hallway was empty. Only a faint light flickered from the street outside. Lying at his feet was a folded piece of paper. It read, "The choice you make next will decide what you become." Ryan's heart raced. He wanted to believe it was some prank, but deep down he knew it wasn't. The next morning at work, he tried to focus, but the world around him felt off balance. Claire noticed his distraction. "You look pale," she said, handing him a coffee. "Rough night." He hesitated, then nodded. "Just weird dreams." She smiled, but her eyes lingered on him as if she knew he wasn't telling the full truth. Later that day, Mr. Hale gathered the employees for a meeting. A new charity project was being launched, providing supplies to a struggling town hit by floods. Volunteers were needed to travel there and assist in distribution. Ryan felt an immediate pull toward it. Mr. Hale's gaze rested on him as he announced, "We need someone who understands what giving truly means." The words felt personal, deliberate. Before he could stop himself, Ryan raised his hand. "I'll go," he said. The following week, Ryan and Claire joined the small team heading to the flood site. The town was in ruins, homes washed away, families huddled in makeshift tents, children searching the mud for lost toys. The smell of wet earth and diesel filled the air. Ryan spent hours carrying boxes of food and blankets, his muscles aching but his heart strangely alive. Each face he helped carried a reflection of something he couldn't name: gratitude, pain, survival. Claire worked beside him, her quiet strength grounding him through exhaustion. But as the sun dipped behind a broken skyline, he noticed something unusual. A boy, no older than 10, stood at the edge of the camp holding a small pendant. He watched Ryan with wide, unblinking eyes. When Ryan approached, the boy handed him the pendant and whispered, "He said you'd come." Ryan knelt, confused. "Who?" The boy looked toward the hills. "The man with the coin." Before Ryan could ask more, the boy ran off into the fog. When he opened his hand, he saw the pendant bore the same markings as the coin in his drawer. That night, rain fell again and the camp generators flickered. Ryan sat by the dim light, staring at the pendant, wondering if fate was playing tricks on him. Claire sat beside him quietly, sensing his unease. "You ever feel like life's testing you?" he asked softly. She smiled faintly. "Always. The trick is realizing that the test isn't meant to break you. It's meant to show you what you really are." Her words settled deep within him. The next morning, a landslide hit the outskirts of the camp. Panic erupted. People screamed, tents collapsed, and muddy water rushed toward the lower grounds. Ryan ran toward the chaos, pulling people from the wreckage, shouting for others to help. Amid the noise, he heard a faint cry, a child trapped beneath debris. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the mud, digging with bare hands until his fingers bled. He pulled the boy out just as another wave hit. When he looked down, it was the same boy who'd given him the pendant. The child coughed and whispered, "He said you'd save me." Ryan froze, rain streaming down his face. He looked around, but no one else seemed to notice. Who was he? And why did this feel like a prophecy unfolding? When the rescue team arrived, Ryan stood motionless, clutching the pendant. In that moment, he realized that this was no random act of kindness. This was something larger, something unseen weaving through his life. Back at the company, Mr. Hale listened quietly as Ryan recounted what happened. When he showed him the pendant, Mr. Hale's face went pale. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. Ryan hesitated. "A boy gave it to me. He said someone told him I'd come." Mr. Hale leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Ryan," he said slowly, "that symbol belongs to a group that no longer exists. They believe that every act of kindness carried a debt, one that the universe always collects." Ryan frowned, unsettled. "What are you saying?" Mr. Hale looked at him with weary eyes. "I'm saying your test isn't over yet. The world remembers, Ryan, always." Outside, thunder rolled again, and for the first time, Ryan wasn't sure the storm was in the sky or within him. The storm lingered for days after Ryan's return. Thunder rolled through the nights, and the city felt uneasy, as though something vast and unseen was shifting beneath its surface. Ryan couldn't shake the memory of the boy's words or the pendant's strange markings. He kept it in his pocket, unable to leave it behind. At work, Mr. Hale seemed distant, his calm demeanor replaced by something heavier. When Ryan tried to ask about the pendant again, he received only silence. "Some truths," Mr. Hale finally said. "Wait until you're ready to carry them." One evening, as Ryan walked home, the streetlights flickered and the air grew strangely cold. A figure stepped out of the shadows, tall, cloaked, his face hidden by the dim glow of the lamps. "You've met him," the figure said, voice low and distorted. "The old man who speaks of ripples." Ryan froze. "Who are you?" The stranger smiled faintly. "A reminder. The universe keeps its balance. What you give, it returns, but it also collects." Before Ryan could respond, the man vanished into the rain, leaving behind only a chill that sank into his bones. The next day, Mr. Hale didn't come to work. Claire found his office door locked, his desk empty except for a single note addressed to Ryan. It read, "When the past knocks, let it in. Only then will you understand why I chose you." Confused and worried, Ryan went to Mr. Hale's house. The front door was open. Inside, the lights were off, and the air smelled of dust and old paper. On the table lay an open book filled with symbols identical to those on the pendant and the coin. In the center of the book was a faded photograph. The same boy from the flood, standing beside a younger Mr. Hale. Ryan's pulse quickened. The boy hadn't aged. It didn't make sense. He turned the photograph over and found a date written in ink, 1962. His mind reeled. How could that be possible? The floor creaked behind him, and he spun around, but no one was there. A whisper seemed to rise from the walls. Kindness doesn't die, it transforms. Ryan stumbled back, heart pounding. He grabbed the book and ran out into the night. He spent hours trying to make sense of it. The book spoke of a philosophy, or perhaps a secret order, called the Balance Keepers. They believed that every act of compassion sent energy through time itself, shaping destinies across generations. When someone's kindness went unrepaid, the universe appointed a successor, a bearer, to continue the cycle. The pendant, the coin, even the boy, they were all pieces of that unseen pattern. And now, Ryan realized with a cold certainty, he had been chosen to bear it. As days passed, strange things began happening. People he had helped before reappeared in his life in inexplicable ways. A cab driver who refused his fare, claiming he owed Ryan his safety. A stranger on the subway who handed him an envelope containing money he'd lost weeks ago. A child waving at him from a bus window with the same pendant hanging around her neck. The world seemed to bend around him, rearranging itself in quiet acknowledgement of some larger truth. One night, Claire came over after work, finding him buried in the pages of Mr. Hale's book. "You look like you haven't slept in days," she said softly. Ryan looked up, his eyes hollow but burning with clarity. "I think he was part of something much bigger, and now it's happening to me." She frowned. "Happening how?" He hesitated, then showed her the photograph. Claire's face drained of color. "Ryan," she whispered, "that boy—" "I saw him too, the day of the flood." They sat in silence, the weight of the impossible hanging between them. Then Ryan said what both of them were too afraid to voice. "He's not just a boy. He's the messenger." Claire swallowed hard. "Of what?" Ryan looked down at the pendant in his hand, its faint glow reflecting in his eyes. "Of the test. And I think it's only beginning." Outside, the storm finally broke, but the thunder didn't fade. It echoed like a warning. Ryan didn't yet understand the price of what he'd inherited, or that Mr. Hale's disappearance wasn't an end, but the start of a reckoning that would decide not only his fate, but the balance of every act of kindness that had ever been given and forgotten. The morning after the storm, the city was eerily quiet. Ryan stood at his window, the pendant glinting faintly in his hand. It pulsed, softly at first, then stronger like a heartbeat. He felt an urge to follow it, as if it were pulling him somewhere. Claire met him downstairs, clutching a newspaper. The headline froze his breath. "Local businessman missing. Mysterious symbol found at scene." Below it was a photo of Mr. Hale's office, the same pendant symbol carved into his desk. Ryan's hands trembled. "It's starting," he whispered. Claire frowned. "What's starting?" He looked at her, eyes dark and steady. "The test." They followed the pendant's faint glow through the fog-draped streets to an old library on the edge of town, the kind that smelled of dust, wood, and secrets. Inside, the librarian greeted them with an odd familiarity. "You've come for the Keeper's Journal," she said quietly. "He said you would." Without another word, she handed Ryan a sealed envelope marked with Mr. Hale's initials. Ryan opened it slowly. Inside was a note. "To the next bearer, you must decide if kindness can survive without reward. Tonight, someone will need your help. If you walk away, you'll keep your peace. If you help them, you'll lose something precious. Choose wisely. The balance depends on it." Ryan's throat tightened. "Lose something precious?" he murmured. Claire's eyes filled with concern. "Ryan, you don't owe anyone this. You've already given enough." But deep down, Ryan knew this was the reason the boy, the pendant, and Mr. Hale had come into his life. That night, rain began to fall again, steady, relentless. Ryan walked alone through the streets, unsure where he was going. Then he heard it, a cry for help. Down a narrow alley, a woman was trapped beneath a collapsed scaffold, the metal beams pinning her leg. Smoke billowed from a nearby transformer about to explode. Ryan froze. His pendant flared bright gold. He hesitated only for a second, then ran. He lifted the beam with all his strength, shouting for the woman to crawl free. The moment she did, the transformer burst, and a flash of white light engulfed them both. When the world steadied, Ryan was on the ground, gasping, his arm badly burned. The woman sobbed in gratitude, whispering, "You saved my life." But Ryan couldn't answer. The pendant on his neck had turned black. Days later, he awoke in a hospital bed, his arm bandaged. Claire sat beside him, tears in her eyes. "You did it again," she said softly. "You gave everything." Ryan smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the point." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked out the window, where sunlight finally broke through clouds. "Kindness isn't about what we get back. It's about what we give, even when it costs us." As he spoke, the pendant glowed once more, but this time, instead of gold, it shimmered into light and dissolved in his palm. Claire gasped. "Ryan," he smiled, "I think I passed the test." In that moment, the hospital room grew warm, filled with quiet hum, like the echo of something divine. Outside, the rain stopped. Across the city, people reported acts of unexpected kindness. Strangers paying bills, helping the sick, forgiving debts. The balance had shifted. Ryan didn't become rich or famous, but he found something greater: peace. He started a small foundation, helping people in need without ever expecting a return. On the wall above his desk hung a framed quote, written in Mr. Hale's handwriting. "True kindness is not remembered by who you help, but by who you become after helping." And somewhere, far beyond the city, the boy from the flood watched quietly, a faint smile on his face. Another bearer had fulfilled his purpose. The cycle would continue, one act of kindness at a time. Years passed, and Ryan's foundation, the Ripple Project, grew beyond anything he had imagined. It started as a single act of gratitude, one man trying to give back, but it had become a global movement of compassion. Yet, with growth came whispers, power, and the kind of attention that tests even the purest hearts. Reporters called him the man who turned struggle into hope. Donors lined up, and soon his small team managed millions in charity funds. That was when the struggle returned, not in the form of poverty or pain, but in temptation. One evening, Ryan sat in his office as rain tapped softly against the windows. Claire placed a folder on his desk. "There's a problem," she said quietly. Inside was a report showing that one of their directors, a man named Lewis, had been diverting funds to his personal accounts. Ryan's chest tightened. "How much?" Claire hesitated. "Enough to destroy everything if it gets out." Ryan leaned back, exhausted. The same world he had once wanted to fix was now cracking inside his own creation. "He's been with us from the start," he whispered. "He believed in this." Claire shook her head. "Belief doesn't stop greed." Ryan stared at the window, lost in thought. He remembered Mr. Hale's words. "Kindness that expects purity from others will always break." He called Lewis into the office that night. The man looked older, guilt already etched into his face. "Why?" Ryan asked simply. Lewis sighed, unable to meet his eyes. "Because kindness doesn't pay bills. I gave years to this place, and all I got was exhaustion. I thought I deserved more." Ryan listened quietly, no anger in his voice. "You deserved honesty," he said softly. "That's what kindness builds on." Ryan didn't call the police. Instead, he told Lewis to leave, but not before giving him a small envelope. Inside were documents for giving the stolen amount and a letter that read, "You can still be better. Start now." Lewis broke down crying. When the board found out, they were furious. Donors threatened to pull out. Claire begged him to reconsider. "Ryan, people will think you're weak. They'll say you protect corruption." Ryan looked at her and smiled faintly. "Let them. Kindness doesn't need to be understood. It just needs to continue." Weeks passed. News spread, and surprisingly, instead of collapsing, the Ripple Project gained more support. People were moved by Ryan's mercy. They called it the forgiveness that saved a movement. Lewis, ashamed but transformed, used what remained of his savings to start a free housing shelter for struggling families. Ryan never took credit, but deep down he knew the Ripple had reached its final circle. One morning, Ryan visited the old bridge where he once helped a stranger years ago. The air was quiet, sunlight painting gold over the water. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you for every test." A soft breeze brushed past, almost like a response. He smiled. Kindness came full circle. As he turned to leave, a small boy approached, barefoot, holding a broken toy. "Mister, can you fix this?" Ryan knelt down, smiling. Of course. He took the toy gently, remembering where it had all begun. And in that simple act, the cycle started again, unnoticed, unstoppable. The screen fades to black. A warm piano melody plays. Voiceover. When kindness meets struggle, it creates ripples that never end. You may never see the wave you start, but somewhere, someone's life will change because of you. On-screen text. Be kind. Inspire others. Change the world. Call to action. If this story touched your heart, hit like, subscribe, and share, because kindness grows when we pass it on.